I'm Susan Crook. I'm an assistant professor at Loras College in Dubuque, Iowa. My most memorable IBL experience, I have two. The first one was the first time that I went to the R.L. Moore conference and the workshop that was beforehand at that time in 2010. I distinctly remember getting there the first day and not knowing what to expect and thinking, oh my gosh, these are my people. As soon as we started working, they just completely validated everything I'd thought about how math should be taught and how students should interact and how they should practice and really become mathematicians rather than just regurgitators. My second most memorable IBL experience was after I had attended the workshop and the Legacy Conference in 2010, I decided to teach my own intro proofs class, IBL, at North Carolina State University where I was a grad student. I didn't really ask anyone for permission. I just sort of flew under the radar and did it to see what would happen. I had some struggles, some of the normal struggles that novice instructors have, but I found that my students really just leaps and bounds learned. So the grad students at NC State have to tutor in a tutoring lab, and we get students from any class in there. I was giving a test in my intro proofs class later that day, and there were a couple students from another section of the same course, and they're doing work, and they were asking for help and bemoaning how hard the class was. A couple of my students came in, and I explained to one of them, answered a question for her, and we worked through something. And a second student came in to ask on a similar topic, and I started to explain it to him before she quickly said, oh, I've got it, I'll explain it to him. You can go help other people, we can do this. So they worked together, and another student came in and they kept working together. They eventually moved up to the whiteboard in the room and started working out proofs on the board, and I went over to see what they were doing, and they quickly told me to get away, we can do it on our own, we'll call you if we need your help. And one of the other people in there getting help, who was a student in the same course but in a different section, looked at me and said, why are there grad students in here working? And I said, oh no, those are my students, they're in the same class you're in. And she said, but they understand what they're doing. I said, they do. They've worked really hard to understand what they're doing. She said, they're doing it without you. I said, they are. And I couldn't have been prouder of my students for learning how to do things on their own and being so sure and confident in themselves that they could get it and willing to work on things even though they didn't have an answer, that they were willing to shoo me away. The biggest thing for the student is confidence. Just the confidence in themselves that they can approach a problem they don't already know how to do, and they can play around with it, and that they'll get there eventually. So I think a lot of students come into math missing this confidence piece. They think that they'll never be able to do it, and as soon as they get stuck, they just stop. So I think the biggest difference you see in students who've taken an IBL course is when they come out, they don't want to stop. They want to keep playing, and they in fact don't even want you to tell them the answer. They want to struggle with it for a little bit because they have this confidence in themselves that they're smart enough to get there. I think there is an initial success that helps. I think there's also, in an IBL classroom, there's an emphasis placed on failure, and that failure is a good thing, and the only way to get to success is to fail, and you have to be willing to do that and realize that, okay, I failed, well that's good, that means I marked one way that you can't do this off of the list, now I'll go back to another way. So I think they don't get as discouraged and they get to see themselves succeed. I also think in an IBL classroom, this is where the professor becomes important. They may not be standing up lecturing, but they're picking problems very carefully so that there's a good scaffold and they can have some successes so that when they get to the problems that are a little harder, they have the confidence to keep trying because they've had these early successes.